The pen hovered above the signature line. Adeline Whitfield read the figure again. $184,000. Repair contract. Cedar Falls Public Library. Her grandfather's name on the founding plaque. Across the table sat a man in flannel flecked with sawdust. He had not spoken in 3 minutes. "I don't sign blank checks for unknown contractors," she said. "Not on a building my grandfather paid to build." Wesley Hargrove did not flinch. He set a yellowed photocopy on the table and stepped back. She looked down. Her hand began to shake. Theodore Hargrove. Harlan Whitfield. Cedar Falls, 1962. 3 days earlier, Wesley Hargrove stood on a folding ladder in the main reading room of Cedar Falls Public Library. Running his fingers along a hairline crack in the ceiling beam, his notebook lay open on the windowsill below him. The handwriting in it was small and precise, full of load calculations and shorthand symbols that did not belong to any general repairman. Lily sat on the cushioned bench beneath the tall south window, a sketchbook balanced on her knees. She was 9, with her mother's dark hair and her father's steady patience. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall on Iowa. The flakes were small and dry, the kind that meant a long winter. Marguerite Vance, head librarian for 41 years, brought the child a paper cup of cocoa and stayed to watch the man on the ladder. She had seen those hands before, the way they moved across the grain of the wood, the way the man tilted his head to listen for hollow spots, the way he whispered numbers under his breath without looking at the notebook. She had stood in this same room, watching another man do exactly the same thing in 1962. She had been 27 years old then, and the other man had been Theodore Hargrove. She did not say anything. She had been keeping that silence for a very long time. Wesley came down off the ladder, folded a sheet of paper into thirds, and tucked it into his back pocket. His bid for the repair work was 30% under what the larger contractors had submitted. He had not billed for his own labor. He had only billed for materials. He nodded to Marguerite on his way out. She nodded back. Neither of them spoke. Lily waved from the bench without looking up from her drawing. In the parking lot, a black Lexus idled at the curb, exhaust fogging the cold air. The window came down. Councilman Brent Kettering watched Wesley walk to his pickup truck. He did not speak. He only watched, the way a hawk watches a movement in the grass. Wesley pretended not to notice. He climbed in and pulled away. 80 miles south, in the Whitfield Heritage Trust office in Des Moines, Adeline Whitfield was reviewing 4 contractor bids for the same project. Her finger stopped at the bottom of the stack. W. Hargrove. Hargrove Repairs. Cedar Falls. The name pulled at something in the back of her mind. A box in her grandfather's study. Letters she had never opened. She could not place it. Caleb, her assistant, leaned through the doorway. "Councilman Kettering called 3 times this morning. He wants the local bidders disqualified, says it'll let the council declare the building beyond economical repair." "And what does he want with it after that?" Caleb hesitated. He didn't say. Adeline turned to the window. Snow was settling on the rooftops of Des Moines. Somewhere north of here, the same snow was falling on a clock tower she had not seen since she was a child. Her grandfather had taken her there once, in late autumn, but she could not remember the season properly. She only remembered the smell of his wool coat. That night, in a small cedar house on the edge of town, Wesley Hargrove burned the toast again. Lily laughed at him. He apologized for the 3rd time that week. "Dad, you're a terrible cook," she said. "But you draw nice." She pushed her sketchbook across the table. "Can you help me with my school project? I have to draw a building in Cedar Falls. I picked the library." He picked up the pencil. In 20 seconds, the library appeared on the page. The proportions, the arched roof, every window in its place. He had not measured. He had not paused. Lily watched him with her chin in her hand. "Dad, how do you know it so well?" "Because I grew up with it," Wesley said. After she fell asleep, he went to the cupboard beneath the stairs and turned the small brass key in the lock. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were dozens of rolled blueprints, the paper soft and yellowed with age. He chose one and unrolled it on the kitchen table. Cedar Falls Public Library. Original construction drawings, signed by his father, and below his father's name, in a steady hand he had never met but had heard about all his life, the second signature read Harlan Whitfield, founding patron. The next morning, Wesley drove the 80 miles to Des Moines in his old Ford pickup. He carried the official bid envelope and one rolled tube under his arm. Snow had stopped overnight. The road was clear. The radio was off. Caleb intercepted him in the lobby of the Whitfield Heritage Trust. Miss Whitfield doesn't meet with individual contractors. There's a process. I'll wait. It could be hours. I have time. Wesley sat down on the leather bench by the elevator. He did not pick up a magazine. He did not check his phone. He took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and began to sketch, slow and steady, the way someone shells peas without watching their hands. 3 hours passed. Caleb walked past him twice and pretended not to see him. At noon, Adeline crossed the lobby on her way to lunch. Her heels clicked on the marble. She glanced down at the bench, and then she stopped. The man was drawing a vaulted ceiling, a cross-section view, every load-bearing detail in its place. The lines were straight without a ruler. The proportions were perfect. She had seen drawings like that before, only from senior architects with 30 years behind them, not from men in flannel shirts. "Come up to my office," she said. He folded the sketch into his pocket and followed her without speaking. In her office, Wesley laid out his repair plan. He did not need notes. He spoke in the calm shorthand of someone who had been thinking about this building his entire life. The original wooden beam system was designed for dynamic load distribution. The architect built flex into it on purpose, because the soil under that part of Cedar Falls shifts a 1/4 inch every winter. Replace those beams with steel, and you defeat the engineering principle the whole building rests on. You don't restore it, you break it. And where did you learn that? He paused for one beat. From my father. She tilted her head and studied him for a moment longer than was polite. I'll need to see your professional license, Mr. Hargrove. State code requires it. He hesitated. Then he opened his wallet and slid a card across the desk. Wesley Hargrove, AIA, Senior Principal, Hargrove and Associates, New York City. The card had expired 4 years earlier. She looked at the card, then she looked at him, the flannel shirt, the calloused hands, the dust still on his sleeves. Hargrove and Associates was one of the most respected architecture firms in the Northeast. Her grandfather had spoken its founder's name with the kind of reverence he reserved for very few people. I don't understand. My wife died 4 years ago, he said. Breast cancer. It took 8 months. I couldn't keep working in that office. I brought my daughter home to Cedar Falls, and I started over with my hands. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. I've turned down 20 restoration contracts in the last 3 years just to stay anonymous. Then why come here now? Because this is my father's building, and he didn't want anyone to tear it down. He unrolled the original blueprint on her desk. The paper was 64 years old. The edges were soft as cloth. Adeline saw her grandfather's signature for the first time in her life. She did not speak. She traced the ink lightly with her fingertip, the way someone touches the face of a person they once loved. When Wesley left, she went down to the private archive on the lower floor of the trust. The room had been locked since the day her grandfather died, 6 months ago. She had never opened the cedar boxes inside. She had not had the courage. One of them was labeled LAP 1962. Inside, tied with linen string, was a stack of letters. The first one she lifted out began, Theo dear, regarding the arch load problem. I think your son will solve it when he grows up. She read it twice. She read it a third time. She sat down on the cold concrete floor of the archive and did not get up for 20 minutes. 2 days later, Adeline drove to Cedar Falls without telling anyone. She wanted to see the building with her own eyes. She had not slept properly since the archive. Marguerite met her at the front entrance. The librarian did not act surprised. She walked Adeline through the building room by room, slow and quiet, the way a docent leads a stranger through a family home. In the main reading room, Adeline stopped at the wall behind the librarian's desk. A small bronze plaque she had never seen before. Harlan Whitfield, founding patron. 1962. He never told me, Adeline said. He came here every summer until you were 8, Marguerite said softly. He used to hold you on his lap in the children's reading corner. You wouldn't remember. You were very small. He read you the Beatrix Potter books, the same ones over and over, until you knew the words by heart, and would correct him if he changed them. Adeline sat down in one of the small wooden chairs by the children's shelves. The seats were sized for 6-year-olds. Her knees came up almost to her chest. She did not move. Outside the tall window, the bare branches of an oak tree scratched against the pane. Somewhere upstairs a radiator ticked. She did not cry. but her eyes were full. She had grown up believing her grandfather was a man of ledgers and trusts and boardrooms. She had not known there was a town 100 miles north of Des Moines where children remembered the weight of him in a reading chair. She had not known he had a second life that did not begin and end at a balance sheet. The front door opened. Wesley walked in carrying his ladder over his shoulder. He had come back to remeasure the corner cracks. He saw Adeline sitting in the small chair, her eyes red, and he stopped where he stood. Neither of them said anything. He went to the far corner, set up the ladder, and began checking the joints. Adeline watched him work. His hands moved over the wood the way a man's hands move over the doorframe of a house he has lived in all his life. The bell on the front door rang again. Lily walked in with her backpack and her sketchbook. She stopped when she saw the strange woman in her usual reading corner. "Hi," Lily said. "Do you like to read?" Adeline smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in 2 weeks. "I do. I'm drawing the library for school. Want to see?" She turned the sketchbook around. The library appeared on the page in clean, confident lines, the kind of lines a child could not draw on her own. Adeline studied them. She had seen that style of pencil work that very morning, in a blueprint signed 64 years ago. 3 generations of the same hand. Wesley climbed down from the ladder. He saw his daughter sitting next to Adeline, knees touching, sketchbook open between them. He did not move for a moment. Lily looked up. "Dad, this is my new friend." Wesley nodded politely. His expression was hard to read. On the drive home, Lily said, "I like her." Wesley made a sound that was not quite a word. He turned the radio on, then turned it off, then drove the rest of the way in silence. 80 miles away, in the City Hall offices, Brent Kettering closed his door and made 2 phone calls. "We moved the vote up. Friday. If Whitfield Trust doesn't sign that repair bill in 72 hours, the building falls into the failed remediation category automatically. That land is mine. I've put 3 years into this. Don't tell me I lose it now because some woman in Des Moines wants to play hero." He hung up. He poured himself a drink and stood at the window, watching the streetlights blink on across Cedar Falls. That night, Adeline checked into the only hotel in Cedar Falls. The room had a quilt on the bed and a coffee maker with a single packet of grounds. She carried up a leather satchel filled with letters and laid them out across the bedspread. She read until midnight. 3 years of correspondence between Harlan Whitfield and Theodore Hargrove. Discussions of cantilever physics. Sketches in the margins, a debate about what kind of window glass would survive Iowa winters. The men had argued for half a year over the angle of the children's reading corner skylight, and the letters showed them softening toward each other as they argued, the way men of that generation softened toward each other only through work, and toward the end, family things. Theodore's young son, who had cried for a week when his pet rabbit died. Harlan's granddaughter, who had just learned to walk. The men had written about their children the way men only write to each other when they have stopped being polite. The last letter, dated December of 1962, read, "Thank you, Theo. Cedar Falls will have a library built not of stone and wood, but of the patience of 2 men who believed in something larger than themselves." She read it twice. Then she folded it back into its envelope with careful fingers. The next morning at 7, Adeline knocked on the door of a small cedar house on the north edge of town. The porch boards were swept. A pair of child-sized snow boots sat by the welcome mat. A wreath of dried wheat hung crookedly on the door. Wesley opened the door. He had slept in his flannel shirt. His hair stuck up on one side. He was holding a cup of coffee. "You're here early," he said. "I know." Lily appeared behind him in her pajamas. "Is she staying for breakfast?" Wesley looked at his daughter. Then he looked back at Adeline. Then he stepped back from the doorway. Adeline sat at the kitchen table with the 2 of them and ate eggs that were a little too brown around the edges and toast that was, predictably, burned. She laughed when Lily told her that her father had been burning bread for 4 years and had not yet learned. Wesley pretended to be offended. Lily was delighted. The kitchen filled with the kind of small, everyday sounds that had not been heard in this house in a long time. After Lily left for school, Adeline laid the letters out across the kitchen table. Wesley read them slowly. His coffee went cold. At the last one, his eyes filled. "My father died when I was 14, he said. He left me the drawings in one sentence. Don't let anyone tear it down. I never knew what he meant. Not until this week. Why did you hide who you were? Even from me. I didn't want help because of the name on the card. I wanted the building saved because it deserved to be saved. Adeline looked at him for a long time. She understood then why her grandfather had trusted a man named Hargrove. The Hargroves did not ask anything for themselves. "I'll sign the repair bill," she said. "I'll sign it today." Wesley shook his head. "Signing isn't enough. Kettering already has 3 votes on the council. The building can't move forward without the council's approval of the contractor either way. We have to win it in open chambers." In front of the town, the council meeting on Thursday morning packed the chamber to the back wall. Most of the town wanted the library saved. Most of the town was not the council. Adeline sat in the front row in a gray suit, the trust folder on her lap. Wesley sat at the very back with Lily. He did not want to be looked at. Lily had brought her sketchbook and was drawing the back of the councilman's bald head with extreme concentration. Kettering presented first. He had hired his own engineering firm. The report concluded that the building was no longer safe for public use. He spoke with the careful sadness of a man pretending to grieve. "The library is a treasure," he said, "but we have to think about the safety of Cedar Falls children." He glanced toward the back row, toward Lily. Wesley took his daughter's hand. Adeline stood and presented the Hargrove repairs proposal. $184,000. 6-month restoration. Original method reinforcement. Materials sourced from regional mills. Local labor. Kettering smiled thinly. A local handyman with no active architectural license in the state of Iowa cannot legally sign a heritage restoration plan. State code is clear on that point. I'm sure Miss Whitfield, with her excellent legal counsel, is aware of this. This was the legal trap. Wesley had let his license lapse when he left New York. Under Iowa statute, the restoration plan needed to be signed by a currently practicing architect in the state. A renewal application could take 90 days. The vote was today. Adeline had no answer. She turned and looked toward the back row. Wesley stood up. He did not say anything. He raised his hand for the citizen comment period. The chair recognized him. He walked the length of the chamber. Lily slipped her hand into Marguerite's and watched her father go past. The librarian had come in plain clothes and had sat in the back row deliberately. Wesley placed the original blueprint on the projector. The room went quiet when the 2 signatures appeared on the screen. He spoke very slowly. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at this building. It was built by 2 men who believed Cedar Falls deserved a place for its children to read. One of them was my father. The other was the grandfather of the woman sitting over there." He pointed. Heads turned. "I came here to do the work because I owed it to him. The license is something I can fix. The building is something we cannot fix once it's gone." The chamber stirred. The vote was postponed to Friday morning. Kettering demanded document authentication and stalked back to his seat without looking at anyone. That night a brick came through the front window of the Cedar house. Glass scattered across the living room rug. A folded note was rubber-banded to the brick. "Return Cedar Falls to Cedar Falls people. Outsiders, stay out." Lily screamed. Wesley caught her against his chest and held her while the broken glass settled around their feet. For the first time in 4 years, he reached for his phone in the middle of the night and dialed a number that did not belong to a hospital or a school. Adeline answered on the second ring. She drove 80 miles in the dark. The road was empty. The radio in her car played static between towns. By the time she reached the house, the county sheriff was finishing the incident report. Lily had cried herself to sleep on her father's shoulder. After the sheriff's cruiser pulled away, Adeline and Wesley sat on the front steps in the cold. Neither of them spoke for 10 minutes. Snow drifted down between the porch beams. She took off her wool coat and laid it across his shoulders. He did not move it off. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "You didn't throw the brick." "No. But it came because of me. It came because of him. There's a difference." They sat without talking until the eastern sky began to gray. Inside, Lily slept with both arms wrapped around a stuffed rabbit. At 6 in the morning, Marguerite Vance knocked on the front door. She came in wearing her winter boots and her old church coat. She carried a small cedar box in both hands. Wesley took it from her and set it on the table. "I've kept this for 41 years, Marguerite said. "I swore to Theodore Hargrove I would never open it, unless Cedar Falls needed it." Wesley lifted the lid. Inside were the full original engineering documents, notarized in 1962, stamped with the seal of the Iowa Office of Historic Properties. The library had been formally registered as a permanent heritage structure. and folded beneath the engineering papers was a single letter from Harlan Whitfield to the Cedar Falls Town Council. Adeline read it aloud. Her hands shook as she turned the page. The letter established a binding legal covenant. Any proposal to demolish Cedar Falls Public Library required the written consent of the Whitfield Heritage Trust. The covenant had been recorded with the county registrar. In March of 1962, it bore 3 notarized signatures and the seal of the state. The covenant had never been revoked. It was as live as the day it was signed. "Why didn't you bring this out before?" Adeline asked. Marguerite's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. Brent Kettering's father sat on the council in 1985. He tried to tear this building down then. Theodore asked me to keep this letter as the last line of defense. I held it back this time because Brent threatened my pension. He sat in my office in October, and he told me exactly what would happen to me if I came forward. He has the votes. He could ruin me. She looked at Wesley. Last night, when I heard about the brick, about the little girl in this house, I could not keep it anymore. Wesley put his arms around her. Marguerite cried for the first time in 41 years. She cried into the shoulder of a man whose father she had loved like a brother. Adeline called the trust's attorney at 7 that morning. By 10, the covenant was filed with the district court. By 11, copies had been hand-delivered to every member of the town council. Kettering knew within the hour. He called Adeline. His voice was tight. He threatened legal action against the trust for interfering with municipal procedure. Adeline answered him in one sentence. "Mr. Kettering, my grandfather anticipated you in 1962. She hung up. That afternoon, Wesley sat at the kitchen table with Lily across from him. She watched him for a long while. "Dad, you look sad." "I'm not sad. I'm thinking about Addie's grandfather." Lily considered this. She drew a small, careful line in her sketchbook. "Is Addie going to stay with us?" Wesley did not have an answer. By Friday morning, the council chamber had filled to double its capacity. The local paper had run the blueprint photograph on the front page. The covenant had been picked up by the Des Moines Register. A camera crew from a regional television station had set up in the parking lot. Kettering tried one last move. He demanded the documents be set aside as lacking modern certification. The trust's attorney produced the cross-notarized copy and the original historic verification. The chair ruled the documents admissible. Kettering's face went pale. The council faced 2 votes. First, recognition of the 1962 covenant. Second, approval of the Hargrove Repairs restoration plan. Before the vote, Wesley was offered the final citizen comment. He did not take the microphone. He walked down the center aisle of the chamber until he stood beside Adeline at the front row. He turned to face the rest of the room. He had not prepared remarks. He spoke the way men speak when they have already accepted that they might lose. "My father built this building before I was born. He believed a town without a library is a town without a memory. I left New York because I lost my wife, and I lost everything else along with her. I came to Cedar Falls because it was the last place my father left me. I'm not asking you to save this building for me. I'm asking you to save it for my daughter, and for your children, and theirs." The chamber was silent. Somewhere in the back row, a woman was crying. Lily sat with Marguerite, her eyes bright on her father. Adeline rested her hand on the table beside his. Not touching. Close enough. The vote came, 5 in favor, 2 against. The covenant was upheld. The restoration was approved. Kettering stood up and walked out. A reporter chased him into the parking lot, asking about the financial connection between Ketterdev and the demolition replacement proposal. He did not answer. He drove away with a clenched jaw. 2 weeks later, the FBI opened a federal investigation into conflict of interest. By the end of the year, 3 members of his shell company would be indicted, and the proposed strip mall on the library site would be quietly withdrawn from county zoning review. After the chamber emptied, Wesley and Adeline stayed seated. Lily ran down the aisle and climbed into her father's lap. For the first time, Wesley let his arms settle around Adeline's shoulders, only for a moment. Then, he drew it back as though he had not done it at all. Adeline did not say anything. She only smiled very faintly. Lily, who missed nothing, looked between the two of them and smiled too, with the small private satisfaction of a child who has been watching something develop and has reached her own conclusions. From the back of the chamber, Marguerite watched them. After 41 years of silence, she felt her promise had been kept whole. She closed her eyes for one long breath and thought about Theodore. about the way he had looked at her the last time she saw him, the autumn before he died. He had told her that some debts take a generation to come due. She had not understood until this morning. That night, Adeline stayed for dinner. Lily made it, which meant Lily poured cereal into 3 bowls and added too much milk to one of them. They laughed more than they ate. Wesley did not burn anything for the first time that week. Before Adeline left, Wesley handed her something flat, wrapped in brown paper. She unwrapped it on the porch, a pencil sketch of the library, the lines clean and confident. Signed in the corner, W. Hargrove, 2026. Below his signature, in fainter pencil, a photocopy of his father's original mark from 1962. Adeline held it carefully. She did not speak. She only looked at him for a long time. 6 weeks later, the restoration was underway. Wesley worked on the library roof with a small crew of local carpenters. The new beams went in by hand, each one fitted to the original joinery patterns. The men brought thermoses of coffee and worked until the light failed. Marguerite came every afternoon and brought sandwiches. She had retired the week before, but said she had no intention of staying home while the building came back. Adeline came back to Cedar Falls every weekend. Officially, she was overseeing trust operations. Caleb had stopped asking why she needed to be in Iowa from Friday afternoon until Monday morning. He had also stopped scheduling Monday morning meetings before noon. Lily had grown used to having Adeline at the Friday dinner table. The child had begun including her in her sketches, not romantic drawings, just 3 figures at a kitchen table, 3 pairs of boots by the door, 3 coffee mugs in the morning, even though Lily drank cocoa. One Saturday afternoon, Wesley walked Adeline out to the small shed behind the cedar house. He turned the key in the padlock and slid the door open. The shelves were full of his father's drawings, decades of work. Public buildings, private homes, restoration plans. The paper was soft and pale with age. She moved along the rows, touching the rolled tubes, as if she were touching her grandfather's memory. "Do you want to take them back to the trust?" Wesley said. "It's a legacy that belongs to both our families." Adeline shook her head. "I want them here, where they belong." A long silence. They both understood what here meant, and that it was not only about the drawings. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Wesley and Adeline sat on the porch. The snow had thawed. The air smelled of wet earth and early spring. A train sounded somewhere south of town, the long, low note carrying across the empty fields. He told her about Margaret, the first time he had spoken about his wife to anyone but his daughter. He told her about the 8 months, and the chemo, and the day Margaret had asked him to promise that he would not become a sad man. He had not kept that promise as well as he wanted to. He told her how Margaret had loved snowstorms and old books and bad cowboy movies, and how she had wanted 3 children and they had only managed 1, and how Lily looked nothing like her mother except in the eyes. He said Margaret would have liked her. He said Margaret would have insisted on it. Adeline did not answer. She rested her head against his shoulder. He did not move. A barred owl called from the woods behind the house. The moon climbed above the bare branches. In the morning, Lily came to the breakfast table with a new drawing in her hand, the 3 of them standing in front of the restored library. Underneath, in her careful 9-year-old print, she had written, "My new family." Adeline held the drawing in both hands and was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her arms. Lily climbed into them and did not let go. Wesley watched them from the kitchen doorway. He turned away and pretended he had something in his eye. The Cedar Falls Public Library reopened on a Saturday morning in May. The town brought flags and cut flowers. The high school band played a soft welcome from the front lawn. Children ran in the grass. Someone had set up a folding table with lemonade and shortbread cookies in waxed paper. An old man Wesley had never met before came up and shook his hand and said only, "Your father fixed our porch in '73, and walked away before Wesley could answer. A new bronze plaque had been mounted in the entrance hall, restored 2026, in honor of Theodore Hargrove and Harlan Whitfield, built by men who believed. Wesley stood beside Adeline on the front steps. There was no formal speech. He thanked the community, thanked Marguerite, thanked his crew by name, and stepped back. He was not a man who liked microphones. Marguerite cut the ribbon. She was crying quietly. She said only one thing into the microphone, and even then she said it as if she were speaking only to 2 men who were not there. "Theodore, Harlan, we kept it." Lily ran up onto the steps and hugged her father around the legs. She had prepared a large drawing for Marguerite, the restored library, hand-rendered in soft pencil, with the new beams visible through the ceiling cutaway her father had taught her how to draw. Marguerite hung it in the children's reading room that same afternoon, in a frame she had bought herself at the hardware store. After the crowd thinned, Wesley and Adeline and Lily walked into the main reading hall. The air smelled of fresh varnish and old paper. Sunlight came through the stained glass windows in long pillars of color, just the way Theodore Hargrove had designed it 64 years earlier. At midday in May, the light fell across the central reading table in a clean ribbon of gold. Wesley looked at the light. Then he looked at Adeline standing inside it, and he understood, for the first time, that his father had designed this moment for someone, on some unknown day in the future. He had not been designing a library. He had been designing a place where, generations later, two strangers might find each other and not have to explain why it felt like coming home. Adeline turned. She caught his eyes. She did not ask anything. He did not say anything. Lily took both of their hands and pulled them toward the children's section, laughing. That evening, Wesley walked Adeline out to the porch alone. The town below them had quieted. A truck went past somewhere on the river road. The air was warm for May, and the maple in the front yard had just begun to leaf out. He took a brass key from his pocket and pressed it into her palm. Not today, not this week, but when you're ready, I want you to have it. Adeline closed her fingers around the key. She did not answer with words. She took his hand. For the first time, neither of them pulled away. They stood there a long time. They did not kiss. They did not embrace. Only her hand inside his, under a sky over Cedar Falls in May. Behind them, through the screen door, they could hear Lily talking to her stuffed rabbit, telling it a long and serious story about a library that almost got torn down but did not. That autumn, the Whitfield Heritage Trust announced a new initiative, the Hargrove Whitfield Foundation, Architecture and Historic Preservation Scholarships for high school students in small Midwestern towns. The first cohort would begin in September. 8 students, full tuition. 2 paid summer apprenticeships with the trust each year. The press release ran 3 paragraphs and was written by Adeline herself, late one night at the kitchen table in Cedar Falls, with Wesley reading over her shoulder and making small suggestions about where to put the commas. Adeline relocated part of the trust office to Cedar Falls. She sold her condo in Des Moines and bought a small house 2 blocks from the library. The realtor said the closing went through in 9 days, which was unusual for that market. Caleb came up twice a month and worked from a desk Adeline had set up in the spare bedroom of the new house. He brought her donuts from the bakery on Elm Street and pretended not to notice when Wesley's pickup truck was already parked in her driveway at 8 in the morning. Wesley renewed his architectural license in Iowa, not to return to full-time practice, only so that he could legally sign heritage restoration plans across the state. He took one project every 6 months, never more. He wanted his afternoons free. He wanted to be there when his daughter came home from school. He wanted to be there to burn the toast. On a late October afternoon, Wesley and Adeline and Lily walked together past the library after the school day ended. The leaves had turned. The air smelled of wood smoke from somewhere east of town. Lily carried a folded piece of paper, her first independent drawing under her father's instruction. A small cedar house with 3 figures sitting on the front porch. They went inside. Marguerite was at the desk reading. She had retired in the summer but came in once a week to shelve and to read. She looked up when they walked through the door and smiled. She was thinking of Theodore and Harlan, 2 men who had sat in this same room 64 years ago, signing the final blueprint. She had carried that scene in her chest for 4 decades. She had not known the picture was incomplete until now. Lily ran to the children's corner. She found the small chair her grandfather had once held Adeline in. She opened her book and began to read. The book was about a girl who built houses out of cardboard for stray cats. Wesley and Adeline stood at the back of the room. His hand found hers. This time he did not search. She took it and laced her fingers through his. "My father designed this vaulted ceiling," he said quietly, "so the light would land right there at 3 in the afternoon every October day." Adeline looked up. The light was falling on Lily. "My grandfather chose your father for a reason," she said. "I think I understand it now." Wesley kissed the top of her head. Only once, nothing dramatic. Only the light, 2 hands holding tightly, and a child reading in a room that 3 generations had kept whole. Outside the stained glass, The first snow of the season had begun to fall on Cedar Falls. The camera pulled back slowly across the entrance hall. The bronze plaque caught the afternoon light, restored 2026, by men who believed, and below it, freshly engraved the week before, a new line, and by those who came after. Neither of them had been looking, and maybe that was exactly why it found them.